So from an interviewing standpoint, the interviewing processes are different for, let's say, a DevOps engineer versus a site reliability engineer. Let's go over the DevOps engineer first. For a DevOps engineer, typically the first round or first couple of rounds are around basic DSA and scripting. So you might either be given scripting assignments, or on the fly, you might be asked a question where you would be required to maybe write a solution, a code in Python or Golang, depending on whichever is the scripting language of your choice. There might be, again, easy to medium DSA questions that you might be asked. Again, you can write code for it in Python. As long as the time complexities are fine, the code is optimized, you're good to go. Then the next few rounds are around Linux fundamentals, your understanding of, given a case, what are the Linux commands to use to maybe get the result. Maybe your understanding, especially on computer networks, that being one of the things that you'll work very frequently with, right? So what are the networking components, networking layers? How do you establish socket connections? How do you measure what the sockets are doing, et cetera, et cetera? All of that could be, again, another part of the question. And maybe some questions around operating systems. If you're interviewing for a cloud engineering role, then there are questions around cloud components. If the company actually cares about a certain tool, for example, they do care very deeply about somebody knowing about Ansible or somebody knowing about Kubernetes, then you can also expect that in some of these rounds, there will be grilling on the knowledge aspect of some of these tools. They might give you a scenario and they would ask you, how would you configure this tool in this scenario? Finally, there is one round on a troubleshooting case study, which is you describe a case, and then you're asked, what will you start looking at to figure out where the problem is? Again, there is no correct solution to that, but what typically companies are looking at is whether you take the right approach. Are you considering all aspects when you're going about troubleshooting the given case? There might be one more round, which is around discussing your previous projects, the previous work you have done, the kind of depth of work you have done, in case you are somebody who is already experienced and has relevant experience. So those are all of your rounds for a DevOps engineering role. When you move to an SRE role, the rounds remain very similar, except for the fact that your first two rounds, which are around DSA, they tend to become more complex. The hardness of the problem increases. In fact, then it is at par with, let's say, a software engineering role. And typically, there is one round on system design. Now, system design could be tested in two possible ways. One is through the, again, troubleshooting case study that you're given. The scale of the system might be very high, and hence you're expected to know about certain things. For example, imagine the system that you are troubleshooting is using Kafka at a very large scale. Then what are the components of Kafka? What do certain terminologies mean? You might be required to know about some of those. But typically there is either via your troubleshooting case study or a separate question altogether, there is one round to test your knowledge of system design. Those are two additional rounds that happen for an SRE. In combination, all roles test for your basic problem solving skill, basic scripting skills through DSA. SRE also get tested on system design and maybe a more complex DSA. There are rounds on testing for your Linux understanding, your computer networking, and your operating system skills. And finally, there are troubleshooting case studies that are given to you. And the companies try to evaluate how you respond to those. What is your approach to solving those troubleshooting case studies? If you have experience, then there is also a discussion on your previous experience. So that's the overall interviewing experience. I hope that helps.